Welcome to this free Blender Texturing and Animation Beginners course. During this 45-minute tutorial, you will understand the basics of procedural texturing in Blender. If you want to dive deeper into texturing and animation in Blender, check the link in the description and get access to our full course. Now, let's begin!
Hello everybody, Nathan Batchelor here, and I'm going to give you our introduction into our Blender Texturing and Animation course. So in our course, you're going to have 3 sections. The first section is going to be on how to make procedurally generated textures using the shader editor. And the second part of our course will involve texture painting using this free painting add-on called UkuPaint. And the third section of our course will be on character animation. With this character, I'm going to teach you how to make a run cycle, a jump animation, and a sitting animation. Then we're going to take our jump and running animations and put them together in a single scene. Then I'll teach you how to light and render it. Another thing to note is you'll need to have a certain number of add-ons enabled while working on my tutorial series. You can access your add-ons by going to Edit, Preferences, and then looking at add-ons. First to note, the version of Blender we're using is Blender 3.6 LTS. That's the version of Blender we're using, and if you are not using that version, you will not be able to use and animate this rig correctly. It only works in 3.6. So here are the add-ons you want to enable. Make sure you enable the Grease Pencil Tools add-on. This makes it so you can hold Alt and middle click. You have the time bar go through and you can scrub on the timeline. You can go in and click on your timeline scrub and change the color of the line and the cursor. You can also change the keyframes from lines to diamonds, which is how your keyframes show up on the timeline. Naturally, they'll look like lines, little slightly thicker lines. I prefer to keep them as diamonds, since that's what they look like in our timeline down here. But the choice is up to you how you want your keyframes to look. Additionally, we want to use another add-on called Copy Attributes. You're going to want to enable this. And additionally, you'll want to enable the Emulate 3-button mouse. Traditionally, when you're using Blender, you're using the middle click to orbit, shift middle click to pan, and rolling in or control shift, and rolling in or control middle click to zoom in. I like to use, when you enable the Emulate 3-button mouse, it allows you to use Alt left click to orbit, Alt shift click to pan, and Control Alt to zoom in. It also allows you to make loop selections by clicking on a line in between 2 vertices and clicking twice. You can do this in vertex, edges, and faces. Now when you're selecting faces, you want to make sure you select the edge where you want the loop to go. And the reason we use the Interface Copy Attributes add-on is because it allows you to pose your character, select everything, hit Ctrl-C, and you get this special attributes menu that shows up. You can copy your pose, as well as any and all of these selections here, and hit Ctrl-Shift-V and paste them to the other side. We'll be using this while we're animating. And just a minute ago, I told you how we're using this add-on called UkuPaint. You can download it for free online. Make sure you install and enable it. And it allows you to do layer-based texturing. And we'll be using this while we're doing the texture painting section of our tutorial series. And that's all you need to know for our tutorial series. I look forward to seeing you in the first tutorial, and I'm thankful that you wanted to join us today. Anyways, I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Now before we get started, we're going to be enabling one or two add-ons. You're going to want to make sure you have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled and Node Arrange. This just makes things more convenient. And we are in Blender 3.6.1 LTS. So once you have those enabled, let me go ahead and get my screencast. All right, so now that you have that done, you're going to click on your cube and then hit Control 4. It's a little hotkey that smooths out your objects. And then you'll right click, hit Shade Smooth. Then we'll go ahead and go to our modifiers and add a Displace modifier. Now we create a new texture, click on the button here, and you'll go to Clouds. That's what you'll set this to. And so it should look like this. And you can change the size, something closer to around this. The certain number doesn't really matter. It matters if you're happy with the shape or not. And so now we've got a pretty decent shape. We'll go ahead and go back to Displace and adjust the strength a little bit. Well, also a fun thing that you can do with this is if you turn edit mode on, and you go to edit mode, you grab some of the vertices, you can actually use this to create multiple different rocks. So I'll select everything, and as you're moving it, you get a different rock every time. So this is a very good way to make rocks and make them quickly. So I'm going to scale this a little bit like that. Make it a little wider at the base. You just go ahead and adjust it until you're happy. I think this is good. And then I'll hover my mouse over the subsurface and Displace, and I'll hit Control A. Now this is applied, and we'll go ahead and bring out our shader editor. All right, so now you're going to want to add a noise texture. So we'll go at Noise, bring it here. I'm going to take the color and create a bump map. And I'll take this, and you can hit Alt right click and it connects them. It's very useful. And of course you'll want to go to material mode so you can see it. And so when you're working in the shader, it sometimes takes a minute. Oh, I forgot, I need to put it into height, not into strength. There we go. And for the sake of niceties, I'm going to click on the noise texture and hit Control T. This is just pretty, and it gives you more control over your texture, whether you want to adjust things from the mapping node. And you want to make sure it's coming from generated. Next, we'll move everything off to the side, and we'll hit Shift A, and we'll look for a Musgrave texture. Put that in between. And now we're going to go start adjusting some dials. So what I like to do is to scale down on the noise texture and then bring up the detail. And if it looks too detailed, I'll just scale it down a little, some more. Then we can do some scaling on the Musgrave texture, and it gives it some nice, well, textures going on there. And the fun thing about doing textures in Blender is you can just sort of figure it out as you go. Now, I think this is a good enough texture for a rock. But now we're going to give it a little color. So what we'll do is we'll hit Shift A, and then we'll look for a color ramp. We'll plug that in here. Now when it's like this, there's not much you can do as far as the colors, but if you take the noise texture and plug it into the factor, then you can start adjusting the colors a little bit. So of course we're not going to be using black, we're going to be using a gray kind of color. And we can add some more sliders and make adjustments as we see fit. The closer they come together, the more clear they become. And so just go ahead and play with the sliders till you get a color you're happy with. We'll go ahead and make this a little bit darker. You can have as many little check parts as you want, but most of the color changing happens near the middle of the color ramp. And there you go. I'd say this is a texture I'm happy with. And so, here's how you make a simple rock. This is the full map that I'm using. You can, of course, make rocks using much more complicated maps, but this is a good one to start with, especially when you're just learning how to use Blender. And there you go. We made ourselves a rock. So I hope this was helpful for you. And that's how we make a rock and rock texture. Now after this tutorial, we're gonna learn how to make scratches. So stick around and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Later. Hello everybody, Nathan Batchelor here. And today we're gonna learn about how to make some metal scratches. So first we're going to subdivide this and smooth that out, apply that, and smooth that out. So if you're curious, I hit Alt-Shift-S and that let me make it into a circle. And then I'm gonna pull out our shader editor. Now at this time you should still have the Node Wrangler add-on enabled. And we'll go to Material Preview. I'm going to create a noise texture. Create a noise texture, and then pull out a color ramp and put the factor into the color ramp. And just to keep things nice, I'm going to hit the noise texture and hit Control-T, getting us a mapping node. And then we go to Voronoi texture. First we turn this to Minkowski, and we plug the color ramp into Exponent. Now if you want to be able to see everything, hold Control-Shift and left-click, and you can see how our texture looks so far. And if you hold Control-Shift and left-click on any nodes, it'll show you how those look in the material view. And if you click on the Principal BSDF, it does that. So anyway. So we want it to be on distance. Going to adjust some of the color ramp a little bit. We're going to take the detail, put it to 15. Take the roughness, put it to 1. And distortion, you can add a little distortion, it won't make too much difference. Then we'll take the Voronoi texture and hit it from F1 to F2. And we'll go ahead and get another color ramp. All right, now it's coming back to me. All right, and so what you're gonna do is bring out a Musgrave texture, put it down here, and then you're gonna hit Shift A and search for color, that is mix color, and connect that to the Voronoi texture here, and take the height from the Musgrave and put it in here. Then you'll take the mix and set it to, let me zoom out a little bit. It'll set it to subtract. Then we'll adjust this a little bit. You'll see the color later. You'll see the color better in a little bit. All right. Move everything to the side. We get a ramp, a color ramp. And we'll adjust it. Now you can see we've got a bit of something a little bit like scratches. They look a little bit like rust spots. And so this is where we can go back and start making adjustments. And we play with some of the nodes, see what happens. Let's see. Mix. Woo. So my mistake. We'll want to have the mix RGB or the mix color stay on mix and not on color. Adjust the factor as is best. Oh, that looks so much better now. We'll adjust the ramp. And then we'll move everything back. We'll take the color and add a bump node. Then we'll hit Alt right click and connect it here. It almost always connects to the normal map perfectly. But you'll want to take this and add it to the height map. Now, going back, this back a little bit. Make sure you save your project as well. I'm going to duplicate this and plug this into the base color here and hold Control Shift and left click on the Principled BSDF. Now we can see the bump maps. There we go. And now this is going to be our color. And so you can pick your main color here. I'm going to choose red, a dark red. And you add another color here. Pull it behind the black and set the value to 1. And so this is the color of how the metal will look under the paint. And so you just adjust the dials, maybe add another dial to get what you want until you're happy with the color. Then we'll take the color ramp down here, plug it into metallic. There, now it looks more metallic. And we'll take this and we'll add an invert color. You want this to plug into color and go into roughness. Now that's the kind of the glossiness. Yep, now you can see. So we don't want our metal to look like a mirror. So we'll just dial this back a little bit and get something we're happy with. All right. And so this is the whole node setup. Let me just bring everything together so it's a bit easier to see. So this is the node setup we ended with, and you can just follow it from here. And this is the result. I hope you like what we got here. This is how you make some procedurally generated scratches. And so stick around. After this, we're going to teach you how to make a glass shader. So thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Later!
Hey there! I hope you're enjoying the tutorial and already learning how to use Blender. If you would like to explore the extended version of this course, check out the link in the description where you will find our complete Blender texturing and animations course for beginners to advanced users, with more than 25 lectures and many more exercises for you to complete. Now, let's continue.
And we are back with another tutorial on how to make another texture. So this time we're going to make glass, And before that, I'm actually going to have to create a scene. So I'm going to go and make a plane, take this, scale it up, select the edge, extrude that up, select the edge here, hit Control B, and then I'll roll on my mouse to get however many subdivisions I want. Take this, right click, shade smooth. Now we got a background, and we'll pull out our shader editor, and we'll create a texture for this. So for this, we're just going to make a checkered texture. When you look at material view, you can see it. And so I'm actually going to take the white and make it black. And we also want to create an environment, because since glass is translucent, you can't really see it. You see it because of the reflections. So we'll go to our shader editor, go to world, and then we see we've got the background here. Hit Shift A, search, and you're going to search for environment texture. I'm going to take that, connect that here, then you'll hit open. So once you get your environment texture, you go and open, and you search for an HDRI texture. Now I'm going to give you one so you can follow. And once you have your HDRI texture, you go to render, and now you can see it. This will help us to see our glass better. And on top of that, I want to be able to have objects behind it so we can better see the glass. So I'm going to go bring in a sphere, put it right about there, shade smooth, doesn't really matter. And I'm going to give these different colors just so we can see the glass interact with it. This is our little Suzanne monkey head. I like to smooth it because why not? And let's go ahead and put in a torus. I don't usually use toruses. It'd be fun to play with it a little bit. Oh, that's easier to see now. We always need our donut. All right, so now the scene is set up, and we can start making our glass. So for that, I'm going to go and create a sphere. Put that here. A Suzanne head. Put that here. And let's go ahead and just make a cup real quick. And let's go ahead and add a cone. Go ahead and shade everything smooth. Let us subdivide this a few times and apply it. And now we can go ahead and start making the texture. Now we go to our shader editor, go from world to object, go hit new, and now we have our principled BSDF. And we'll set the transmission to 100%. We'll set roughness to 0. And you can see it kind of looking mirrory. Now we want all the other meshes here to have the same look. So I'm going to shift click these two, select the sphere last, hit Control L, and link materials. Now anything that happens to one material will happen to everything. All right, so we can see we're getting something of a mirror, almost somewhat glassy, but not quite. So what we need to do is go into our materials tab, scroll down, and set the blend mode to alpha blend. Now we're starting to get a little more of a glassy look. Still looks a little weird. Go ahead and check backface culling. It looks better already. And hit screen space refraction. And I hit subsurf translucency personally. And now it's already looking much better, but not quite there. What we need to do is go to render, space screen reflections, and hit refraction. And now we're starting to get something closer to a glassy look. There's a few things we can do to make this look better. We'll go to our shader editor, hit Shift A, and type mix, and you want a mix shader. So go ahead and separate those. And you want to go and search for a translucent BSDF. So you take that, connect that there. And you can adjust the settings a bit. I like to go to the color and make sure everything is set to white. Now, was it translucent or transparent? All right, and what we can do to make this look better is we'll go search for a Fresnel and connect that to the factor. And you may not see anything right now, but if you adjust the dial, you can start to see it here. Now what we want to do is reverse that. So we go and search for a color ramp. We'll take the black and the white and switch sides. There we go. Nice little glassy texture. And so if you want, you can go through and adjust the shaders as you see fit. And a little trick you can do that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, is add a solidify modifier. And so you add it and you pull it back. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't. It adds a nice little outline around some of your objects. You just make sure, yes, everything's right. And sometimes it's better to be without it, but it's a good note to have just in case. I'll go ahead and get rid of it. Yeah, it looks better. So this looks good, but you might have noticed that some of it looks a little bit grainy. And that is, it actually looks mostly fine, but sometimes if it comes across looking very grainy, this is a pretty easy fix. And you can see it more so on the cone here than anything. All you have to do, I'll go ahead and make this bigger. I don't know about you, but I want to make these bigger. Yeah, I like that. Makes it easier to see them. But if the glass looks a little grainy, you can just go to the render settings and up the render and up the samples. So I'll take this and set it to maybe 300. And then if you let it wait for a second, it already looks much better. And that's how you make a simple glass shader in Blender. Thank you very much for watching, and in the next tutorial, we're going to learn how to make an eye texture. So I look forward to seeing you there. Take care. We just finished making a rock texture, scratches and glass. Now we're going to make something a little more interesting. We are going to make an eyeball, all using procedurally generated textures. So go ahead and delete your cube and bring in a sphere. I like to scale this up a little bit, personally. Take it, rotate it, and then I want you to duplicate this and shrink it down and put it a little forward, because you know when you look at the human eye, or eyes in general, the lens points out a little bit. So just push it forward a little bit. About here is fine. And then select the other sphere, go into wireframe mode, and delete the lens here. So I'm going to hit X and delete by vertices, and then I'm going to select the line here. If you selected an edge or vertice mode on the edge, in the middle of the edge like this, and double click, it'll select the whole loop. You can do this also with faces as well. So anyway, select the loop here. And I want you to hit Control F and hit Grid Fill. And you go to the box here and adjust it so all the lines are facing upward and sideways. It's looking pretty. And so now we want to go to the magnet and click on Face Project. And I want you to make sure you hit Project Individual Elements. So we click on that. And now what I want you to do is to lift your mouse off of the ground, off of the mouse pad, hit G, and then, oh, hold on. Let's activate the magnet. And so bring your mouse up off the mouse pad, hit G, left click. And then if we look, we can see that the mesh, or the mesh should, yep, it deformed around the other sphere. So we can go ahead and select that, delete it. And now we have a little extrusion. So me personally, woohoo, I'm gonna select this. Oh man. I'd like to select this whole area and just adjust it a little bit. And if you hit G twice, you can edge slide. And so I long to edge slide it just a little bit to make that indentation not as pronounced. And go ahead and hit Shade Smooth. All right, so now we have our eye. Next comes the fun part, the shading. So I'm gonna bring out my shader menu here. If you want, you can go to the shading tab. It'll do the same thing. And create a new texture. And what you're gonna wanna do is, with Node Wrangler enabled, click on your Principled BSDF and hit Control T. Delete the image texture. Pull this back a bit and make sure you have the texture coordinate set to generated. Hit Shift A, gradient, and plug that in. And since we have Node Wrangler enabled, you can hold Control Shift and left click on your shader. Of course, go into Material Preview. You can see some of it here. So I'm going to click one to make sure it's facing forward. And we're going to adjust this just a little bit. Oh wait, first we want to put this to spherical. Then we are going to adjust this by -0.5 on the x-axis and -0.5 on the z-axis. And so now we have the black section facing over here. We want it to come closer to the lens here. So let's go and input a color ramp. And we're going to adjust this so that the white is around the edge there. Bring it right here, bring it so it's a little close together like this. And then you're going to take this and plug this into transmission. Now if you Control Shift click on the Principled BSDF, and when we go to Material View, you can see that it's got this little translucent part here. All right, so now we got this glassy section here, and we can adjust the fall off a little bit so it's not as strong. And what we're going to want to do is go to our render settings, go to screen space reflections, make sure we have refraction and half res trace enabled. Go to Material View, scroll down, and set your blend mode to alpha blend. Now if it does this, don't worry. You just want to uncheck show backface and then hit screen space refraction and subsurf translucency. This doesn't really do anything, but I like to have it enabled. And set your shadow mode to none. All right. Also go ahead and bring your roughness all the way down. Now you know what, we'll leave it as it is for now, just so it'll be easier to see through it. All right. Now that we've got that done, we're going to want to duplicate this mesh here. So hit Shift D, drag it out a bit. I'm going to set this to increment because I use it, and hit S, Y, -1. We'll move it a little bit here. And we want to hold Control and deselect the remaining vertices here. And then hit S, Y, 0. So this zeroes out scaling and makes everything flat. And if you want to select this section without selecting everything else, hover your mouse over a vertice and hit L. It selects everything that is connected. So we'll adjust this a little bit. I might actually go and flatten this again, just for the sake of neatness. All right, nice. Okay, anyway, we want to make sure we have this area selected because this is our iris. So you go, Material, New, and hit Assign. making sure that this area here is selected. And let's go ahead and name these. So I'm going to name this eye, name this iris. All right, you look inside, you can see it's white. So make sure you're on the iris. And you change the color, you can see that you change the color of the iris is what we want just for the sake of seeing it. Because if we can see it, then everything's working correctly. And we'll hit the principal BSDF, hit Control T, get rid of the image texture, and make sure the texture coordinate are set to vector. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create the iris. So create a gradient and hit Control T on this so you can see it. And we're going to need to give it the same coordinates. So negative 0.5 on the X and negative 0.5 on the Z, and making sure we are set to spherical, not linear. Then create a ramp, connect the two, and start adjusting the handles until you can see it. All right, so you can see it's making this weird sphere-y thing going on here. I don't know what's causing this, but there's a solution. If you go to the Y location and click and hold Shift while slowly dragging it, I drag it to about 0.4, and then you can adjust the handles. And so we want it to see the black. Make the iris about that size. We can adjust this a little bit more. The rounder it is, the better, and then we can always adjust the handles. That's probably as good as we can get right now. And also, we can remember. Yes, also remember that some of the roughness makes it difficult to see, but without the roughness, we don't see all the trees here, and I don't want to see them for now. Our iris is done. Sorry, not our iris, our cornea. And now we're going to create the actual iris section. So that's the little lines on the edges here. So go ahead and grab the mapping node, duplicate it, move the texture coordinate a little bit. I'm going to do something interesting. We'll create a noise texture and then a mix color texture. You're going to want to connect the object to the A and the factor to B. Go ahead and click on this. Okay, maybe not. We probably don't want to do that. And we'll get there in a minute. Then connect the results to the point, set the point to normal on the mapping node, and then bring in a Voronoi texture. Bring that in, vector. Now Control, Shift, left click on Voronoi. What is going on? That's a little odd. Oh, so I ended up doing all of this on the sclera, or the eyeball texture. My mistake. Go back to iris and just replicate everything I just did. Mapping, noise, mix, color, factor into B, object into A, result into vector, Voronoi, and set point to normal, vector to vector, Control Shift there. There we go, that's what we wanted. All right, so we can't just use these random colors here. We need to make it look like an iris. So the way we do that is we take the scale on the Y and set it to 0. And then we take the factor here and adjust it to about 0.1. And then if we adjust the scale on the iris here, you can see it adds a little noise and a little wobble to the iris, because irises aren't fully perfect lines going in. If you up the scale of the Voronoi, you get more threads. And sometimes you can play with the Voronoi for different results, but just leaving it as it is and then just upping or lowering the scale as you see fit, that'll be fine. Grab a color ramp, duplicate it, bring it down here, hit this little arrow here, and hit Reset Color Ramp. And this is where you can determine the color of your iris. So I'm going to go ahead and make it a type of green, or a light green. And you actually want to add multiple colors in here. So a little green, a little blue, and the way and when you adjust it, you get more or less, the certain threads became brighter or darker. You adjust those till you're happy. I think I'll up the scale a little bit. Take everything and just move it to the side. And what you can also do, what I like to do, is to add a hue saturation node. And this just makes it easier to adjust the tint. I like to take the saturation and dull it a little bit because you know real human eyes aren't bright colors. They're usually more dulled down. But you can still adjust the hue without having to go through and change every color here. And so I find it very useful. And you also want to make sure you're holding shift so you can dial it more accurately. Let me see, I might add a brighter green here. All right, that's good. And now what we need to do is mix these two together. Now, Blender doesn't have a node that just outright says layer. It'd be very convenient if it did, but you can still layer. You just go and add a mix color, and you add this one in the bottom, this one at the top, and then you hit set mix to multiply. Where are you? There we are. You take it and just drive the factor all the way up. And now you have your eye, but we're not done yet. We're going to do something a little interesting. So I'm going to take everything here, duplicate it, bring it up, set vector to generated, shift click on this so we see the cornea still. And you're going to put the black on the outside. And then we're going to take the location of the Z location and bring it down just a little bit. Adjust this just so we have a little crescent at the top. Reason for this is so we can have a little shadow over the top of the cornea, because the cornea and the iris go into the eye, and so we're just adding a little shadow here. It isn't strictly necessary, but it's a nice little detail. And then we'll just take this node, Shift E, and we'll connect it to B and the multiply here to A. And I believe we keep this to mix. Let us connect these two real quick. Nope, my mistake. Keep it on multiply. There we are. And you adjust it to see how bright you want the shadow to be. You can have it nowhere at all, or you can have it just showing, or you can have it be darker, whichever you choose. And now we'll get to play with sliders. So click on your eye, roughness all the way down, specular all the way down. And then we'll go to iris, roughness all the way down, specular all the way down. Let's see if there's anything I'm missing here. Another thing. So you'll notice now that we have the roughness down that the black and other lines are much more easy to distinguish. We don't want this. So easy solution, go to your color ramp on the bottom row here and set the linear to B-spline. You see it makes it so everything's not as dark, not as high contrast, or bring the dark down a little bit, the black. You can adjust the sliders a little bit, or not at all. I think it works best just bringing black all the way down. Make little adjustments as you see fit. I mean, I might make the iris a little smaller. Yeah, all right. There you go. You have made an eye. Now, you might be wondering, what's with all the lines here? Well, in material mode, for whatever reason, even whether it's smoothed or not, this part is shown in Blender 3.6. However, when you're in render mode, thankfully, let me go ahead and turn this on and get a light in here. When you're in render mode, thankfully, the edges go away, and this eye texture works in both Eevee and cycles. So it works either way. Now, if you're on the right, you may notice that we see the iris bending here due to the light. Oh yeah, also make sure when you're in cycles, you set it to GPU, the device. So there's a way to fix this. And you go to your IOR. I don't remember what this stands for, but you hit it, shift click, and then you drag it down a little bit until it goes away. I like to hold control. At about 1, it goes away. But when you look at it, then you can see the inside of the eye. And so there's a sweet spot here where you bring this down just a bit. And you can fix this by going to edit mode and bringing the lens forward a bit more. Of course, you want to make sure you don't really see the edges here. Might be good to leave the IOR higher, if just a little bit. But most of the time when you're looking at your character, you'll hardly get a solid profile here. But it's good to cover your bases, even if it's a little bit. All right, so I think about 1.1 on your IOR settings the best. Most of the time you're not going to get a strict profile, and you see this mainly when you're on orthographic view, and when you click out of it, it mostly goes away. And most of the time you'll be seeing the eye from good angles anyway, so probably best not to worry too much about the profile of the eye. But yeah, there you go. Works both in Eevee and in cycles. You may have noticed that the cornea and also the shadow looks a little bigger. The reason for that is because we moved this lens here. And if you look in material view, when you do that, you see that the gradient or the iris goes away, the cornea goes away when you're moving it. So if you ever move it post texturing, you will need to go back to your textures and adjust the location on the mapping node a little bit. So I'm going to take this and bring this to about 0.3. You'll also want to adjust it on the color ramp here. It's good to have a little shadow for the cornea since it does go inwards. And then adjust the shadow here. All right, and that looks better. All right, just a little fix I wanted to make sure you all knew before we finish here. Later.
Congratulations on completing this free Blender Texturing and Animation Essentials course. It's a great achievement and I hope that you have enjoyed it. If you would like to learn more, check the link in the description. Our Beginner to Advanced course offers practical projects that will help you become proficient in texturing and animating in Blender. You will learn how to create procedural textures and how to texture character components like shoes and facial features. In the second part of the course, you will learn all about animation techniques. If this sounds like something for you, go check it out. Thank you for watching and I'll see you soon.